Copper, lithium, nickel, cobalt, and aluminum. These are just a few examples of critical raw materials that are needed to build solar panels, batteries, wind turbines, etc. However, these are also scarce materials and not necessarily available within European borders. Well, they might be, claims our next speaker, who challenges us to think circular instead of linear. Hans Auer is professor in energy system economics at TU Wien, or Vienna, the Technological University of Vienna, and affiliated with NTNU here in Trondheim. On Monday, he was responsible for a workshop here in Trondheim on supply chains and recycling of critical raw materials. And he's here now to share with us some of the lessons learned at the workshop, combined with his own research. So the obvious question is, of course, how could a recycling industry look and work in Europe? So Hans, you're already here. Everyone else is getting a pre-applause, so I hope you will get one too.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Okay, so thank you, Ruth. And as you already said, on Monday we organized a very interesting workshop, and I'd like to start when elaborating about the importance of critical raw materials with history. So Mats Ingolstadt told us that in 1817, James Monroe, the 5th president, in his inaugural speech already talked about the importance of raw material supply security and so on. And 200 years later, a president, now again being in office, did mentioned similar aspects in his inaugural address. But finally, it was World War I already when strategic minerals have been mentioned and listed. So this topic is not new. But the disruptions in recent years told us that we in Europe also should think about a little bit more independence in that respect in terms of raw materials along the entire value chain there. But it's not only about, let's say, the green and the digital transition. So we are mainly working on in our field, but it's also about competitiveness of the industry, the defense industry, and so on. And therefore, this Critical Raw Material Act and other acts like the Net Zero Industrial Act, and there is also a Circular Economy Act to come next year or in 2 years at the latest, where we set also European targets on extraction, processing, manufacturing, remanufacturing, and important in that context also recycling, because recycling is very important to generate these local and regional value chains. And also stockpiling is important. So I cite only two numbers, 2009 already in the US, so in the context of rare earth elements, it was discussed and listed, and as a result of COVID, also the Japanese government implemented an important program. And I will also show then how stockpiling could help us to mitigate supply shocks in the short term, and also helping us ramping up, for instance, the recycling industry. So the European Union already has strategic partnerships in terms of raw materials here around the globe. So these have been, let's say, agreements in recent years. But this is not the story I want to tell you today. Of course, we need this. We need, let's say, all parties and people involved need alignment in terms, let's say, respecting individual interests. We need fair trade solutions and so on. So no doubt about that. And we need this global trade. But the story I want to tell today is, so within the European footprint, have to think about, let's say, the different stages in extraction, processing, recycling, and then remanufacturing, that we set targets that we are able to create value within our footprint. And this is in the 2030 benchmarks of the strategic raw materials already given. And in addition to that, we also should think about not to be dependent on a single third, let's say, country in any of these processes of single raw materials. About 1 week ago, so this was the first list of these strategic projects in Europe. We are talking about 47 projects here, covering the entire value chain. Here, these projects, mainly in the context of the battery value chain and the materials we need there. They finally made it. They also have a capital investment of more than 22 billion euros. But of course, it is very, very important, regardless where, and also in Europe, that we try to meet the social and the environmental objectives. And this is a big discussion, and it's very important to respect, let's say, the interests of all parties and also people and local people involved. So, for instance, in Serbia, at present, there is a big discussion in this context. So what I want to show a little bit, and our role in academia is also to think, let's say, a few years ahead, try to understand, let's say, the interrelationships between, let's say, all the dimensions, the parameters, being important to describe, let's say, reality. And here I want to show, for instance, one paper of a colleague of in my group, Sebastian. He's here in the audience, and the co-authors here, and a second one, how also stockpiling could help us to mitigate short-term supply risk and stabilize the supply cost. So here is the case of platinum. So South Africa, for instance, is one of the dominant exporters, and they can offer, let's say, supply capacity, and of course then dominate the market price. And if we stockpile, we can, at a certain point, if we have certain shares, and if there are price spikes or would be shocks available, so we can mitigate it. And here we see it in year 2030 and a few years beyond, and again then 37. So this is how stockpiling could help us to prevent price shocks. On the one hand, so those who are interested in this paper can read it, so I cite it here. And the second one is, so it's a little bit a more tricky situation, but if we talk now about the recycling industry and remanufacturing. So what I show here in yellow is the solar PV capacities we need to install. So more or less several of our models show similar decarbonization paths. And I don't want to talk about, let's say, the PV panels from mining and the imports from outside Europe. I want to concentrate on that shares of these yellow colors here we should recycle and remanufacture. And we have different options to do so. And again, in this modeling, my colleague Sebastian has shown, if we start right now, with that, in real time, of course, there is all the time a lead time. We already stockpiling the yellow, the orange part can help us also in ramping up the recycling industry and the remanufacture capacity we will build there, because at the very beginning we have very low learning rates. We see it on the upper right. And the learning rates, they are then increasing, and then, of course, we can there's no need to rely on stockpiles, and this cycle begins again then later on. So this helps us to win time to ramp up a recycling and remanufacturing industry in terms of solar PV modules. So this is just another input how this could help us, and I'd like to stop here, and we can further discuss then on the panel. Thank you.